Okay, so proteins. We were talking about proteins. These are the large structural molecules in you. We said that carbohydrates are the structural molecule for plants and funguses, and proteins are the structural molecule for you. You are mostly proteins. Animals are mostly proteins. They also facilitate complex chemical reactions as enzymes. We said in the several slides ago that the chemical reactions in biological systems are hugely complicated, and catalysts and enzymes make those reactions easier to do because they lower the amount of energy needed for the reaction to happen. And those catalysts and enzymes are proteins in biological systems. Okay? Just like all biomolecules, thank you, Wookie. Just like all biomolecules, they are made up of small molecules that have been repeated a bunch of times. So in proteins, the small molecules are amino acids, that's the monomer. And the polymers are we call polypeptide chains. Poly meaning many, peptide because that's the name of the kind of bond between amino acids. So you have an amino acid, and the bond that joins them is a peptide bond. So when you have lots of those, it's a polypeptide chain. Okay, so, and then proteins are not just usually one polypeptide. Usually a protein is several polypeptides that have been woven and folded and smashed together in complex patterns to make the functional protein. And so it actually has 4 levels of complexity, and I'll show you a picture of that. So some pictures for you. Here we have, an amino acid covered by my video. Let me move my video down. Whoa, magic. Okay, so this is an example of an amino acid. You don't need to know the structure, but you should recognize it. It's got a nitrogen group, and then 2 carbons and some oxygens. And then what matters is this thing called an R group, and that's what's different in each amino acid, is this part of the molecule. This will not be on the test, but just to show you the structure of an amino acid, okay? It's this thing that hangs off of the middle carbon that makes an amino acid whatever it is. So an amino acid is the monomer of a protein, and they get joined together by these peptide bonds, and the string of amino acids that is a polypeptide chain is very, very, very long. Hundreds, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of base pairs of amino acids long. Very, very long molecules. And it's not just this string. We've got to fold them and make them pretty, basically. So there's all kinds of different structures. The primary structure of an amino acid chain is just the order that the amino acids sit in. And all of these 3-letter abbreviations are different kinds of amino acids. You don't need to know them. But there's all these different kinds of amino acids. So the primary structure is this string of them. And then the secondary structure is what happens to that string. Does it get folded back on itself to make a sheet? Or does it spiral? Or does it do other sorts of things? Just that string, what happens to it? And then those things get woven together into another and yet another layer of complexity. We have multiple polypeptide chains that get woven together, and then often those woven together knots of several different polypeptide chains sit next to other polypeptide chains so that they can work together on something. It's this ridiculously complicated structure. And when you look at this, I don't understand how a biochemist can be an atheist. Like, how much information is here? It's not just the information of the DNA, but it's the information for the order, for what that thing itself does, for how it's woven together with others, and how it plays nicely with its friends. That makes it work. And it's just incredible, the amount of information that's in there. And God is speaking to us through all of this. Like, the Psalms say, the heavens declare the glory of God, so do your proteins. They just scream, there's a God, look what he made. Lipids and nucleic acids are the last 2 kinds of biomolecules. So, give you a moment to write that down. Just a moment. Okay, so biomolecule number 3 are lipids. Lipids is the group that contains fats, oils, and waxes. So olive oil, butter, and the like beeswax that makes up candles, or even artificial waxes like carnauba or something like that, or surfboard wax. That would fall into this category of molecule. These are very large carbon-hydrogen molecules, and they have almost nothing except carbon and hydrogen in them. The others had lots of nitrogen and phosphorus, and these will have a little bit of those other ones, but it's almost all carbon and hydrogen, which means that they don't like to hang out with water. They're hydrophobic, which is why oils and water don't mix, and why it's very hard to melt butter in a pot of boiling water and stir it in. The butter keeps cooling on top because they don't like water. These are the kinds of molecules that your body uses for long-term energy storage. And so a plant that gets a ton of food builds starches, builds lots and lots of sugar chains. An animal that gets lots of food gets fat. And this is the long-term energy storage. This is the I may need this someday when my food supply runs out molecule. It's also the primary component of cell membranes. So you are some great number of cells. Some textbooks say 3 trillion. The video we watched just said 50 trillion. You're lots and lots and lots of cells. Okay, and all of those cells are surrounded by membranes, and the membrane is almost all lipid. So you want to have a low-fat diet so that you don't get fat, but you do need to eat fat, because every time your body makes another cell, it needs some fat to make the membrane. So it's the major component of cell membranes. The little molecule that serves as the monomer is really not all that little. There's very few small lipid molecules. But the monomer is called a fatty acid, and even the fatty acid is pretty long. Okay, but it's the smaller of the kinds of fats. And then there are polymers of fats, and there's two main kinds. There's a steroid, which is a fatty ring, or a fatty acid that's been turned into a ring and then joined to other rings. And so it's a group of 5 rings, looks kind of like an Olympic symbol, sort of, in chemistry. And that ring of fatty acids is called a steroid, and your body uses those to communicate. It's like chemical messages across your body. And then triglycerides are just 3 fatty acids that have been joined together at their top. So it looks like a bar with 3 tails. 3 fatty acids hanging off of a joining molecule across the top. Triglyceride is the most common form of a fat molecule in your body. And so those are lipids, and they're the energy storers. Nucleic acids, we just saw the video on. They're the genetic carrier molecule. They are what carry information from one generation to the next, and carry information for what to do in your body and what chemicals are needed. And not, I keep saying your body, but all living things, right? What makes one pea pod plant like its parent pea pod plant, those are like peas, is because of DNA, right? It's not just people. The monomers are nucleotides. That's the small molecule that gets repeated a whole bunch of times. The polymers are DNA or RNA. And the video went through some of the main differences between those two. Now, proteins are made by reading DNA. DNA creates proteins, and this is on your advanced organizer, and it is on the exam. DNA creates proteins, and proteins make DNA. And so those two build each other. All of the enzymes that the video talked about that you don't need to know the name of for the test, all of those enzymes that were on the video are proteins. And all of those proteins were made by reading DNA. So the DNA has the information for building proteins, and the proteins are necessary to make the DNA, which gets you into kind of a chicken and the egg question. Well, what came first? Were there proteins to assemble DNA, or was there DNA to have the information to make proteins, right? They need each other. You have to have both to have an organism. So this is one of the challenges for biochemists who don't believe in God, is because in order to have life, you have to have DNA. Nothing that is alive does not have DNA, okay? But in order for DNA to be built, you have to have proteins. So the thing had to have proteins to build its DNA, but the proteins that build the DNA are created by the information in the DNA. So you can't have protein to build the DNA without the DNA to build the protein. And so if you don't believe that God made a living thing with DNA and proteins at the same time, you're in this unsolvable spiral, right? And it's a beautiful thing because you can't have one without the other. So which came first? They had to come together, and they had to both randomly evolve in the same little puddle of slime. Now, drop a grenade on that idea. It's done, right? You have to have a creator God. Here's some pictures. This is, you've seen a video with better pictures than this, but a nucleotide is a group of a sugar and a phosphate and some other molecule. Where's my mouse? There it is. And, let's move my video down again. That is a nucleotide, and you don't need to know the structure of it now. Come chapter 5, you will. And then DNA is a double helix. It's two sides that go the opposite direction. One goes this way and one goes this way. And every time there's an A on one side, there's a T on the other. Every time there's a G on one side, there's a C on the other. Okay? That's my lecture. What holes on the advanced organizer do you have that I can answer for you? Okay, cool.